Joining me now, Nolan Finley from the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson from American Black Journal. It's great to see you guys. How's the week been? Nolan, let me start with you.
Well, every day is the same. It's hard. You get up in the morning, it's hard to remember whether it's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. This thing keeps rolling along, and the novelty of it is starting to wear thin, and the terrible consequences of it starting to hit home, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, and the news is still constantly changing, and the
Mhm.
pace of it is not slowing down, which I think is really hard sometimes to keep up with it. Stephen, from your vantage point, how's the week been?
It's been pretty dark. You get used to waking up each morning to check social media to find out who else is sick or who else maybe has died that you didn't even know was sick. That becomes part of your just sort of everyday ritual. Here in the city where we're getting the worst of this, we're still very much on the bad side of the curve. Things continue to snowball, and the losses that are mounting are just really hard to fathom or to shoulder. I mean, it's not anything any of us, I think, could have imagined would ever happen in our lifetimes, and yet here we are in week 3 of this devastating pandemic.
And the one thing I really see is the grieving process is so difficult because we can't celebrate at a funeral the lives of people that we're losing, and we can only connect through social media, which has been good in so many ways, but it's still really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to the other side of this and we're all out in the world together again, there's just going to be a lot of people who aren't there, and we won't have had the normal kinds of traditional ways of marking those absences, of marking those departures. It'll be really strange when the world is back together again, how we kind of process the fact that there's just going to be a lot of people who aren't there.
You know, we're watching the numbers, Nolan, and the cases and the deaths that are happening, specifically in the Southeast Michigan, and looking at the city of Detroit. And Detroit has had to go through so much in its history, but now to be able to flip and redirect resources, set up the testing sites, do all these various things. Can you give me a sense of kind of the bigger picture look at what the city is doing?
Well, I mean, I think the city is really doing remarkably, but it's hard to keep up with the pace at which these cases are multiplying in Detroit. Now, if the experiences of other places are a guide, it will eventually peak and start to come down, and the number of new cases and the number of daily deaths will start to decline. But I feel like we're a long way from that. In the meantime, I mean, the resources of the city just stretched to its limit. It wasn't a city that had a huge buffer in terms of financial resources. And man, I don't know how they deal with this, how they come out of this, and maintain city services.
Stephen, you say cuts are coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a few days now, I think, before we hear about the ways they're going to have to pare back existing city services to try to make sure that they can put resources toward dealing with the pandemic. I mean, if you think of all the things that are happening in the city that are just extraordinary, things that city government would never have contemplated having to do, but that they're having to do, all of it costs money. And if you think of the overwhelming nature of this, the morgue, for instance, is filling up. And they're going to have refrigerator trucks hold bodies for a certain amount of time. We've got this field hospital being built at TCF, formerly Kobo. You've got these massive testing sites where people can go and find out if they're sick. All of that is just overwhelming the capacity of a government that was just getting up off its knees after the bankruptcy and trying to prepare for future financial challenges. There's no way to do this without a lot of sacrifice coming soon.
All right, Nolan, take me looking a little forward this week. I mean, we were seeing the unemployment numbers skyrocket, but what are you going to be watching for in this next week?
Well, it's going to be a devastating week. You know, the first layoffs, the first job losses were almost immediately as businesses like restaurants and bars and retailers closed. Now it's starting to hit really hard, across the white collar worker spectrum, and as well as blue collar worker spectrum, with permanent job cuts, not just 1 week furloughs or 2 week furloughs. A lot of companies are looking out ahead of the year and saying we're going to be down 20, 30% in revenue, and they're making permanent job cuts at a time. And so people are going to be losing their jobs at a time when finding another job is going to be an extraordinarily difficult thing. So the anxiety of that and the loss of health care is just going to exacerbate this problem.
In the 15 seconds that we have left, Stephen, I'm going to give you the last word on what you're going to be looking for this coming week.
Well, we're still waiting to get on the good side of the curve, right? And we're getting closer. The doubling rate of cases and deaths is getting further and further apart. At some point we turn a corner and start trying to rebuild. And I think everybody needs that right now.
Yeah.
It's been hard to endure all of this.
We sure do, but I know it's really good to see you guys. I'm glad that you're staying well, and continue all the reporting that you're doing, and we'll check in with you soon, okay?